Okay, terrific. Hello, it's so nice to be here, so nice to see all of you. I'm going to hold on to this. Really appreciate you being here today for this particular panel. About 3 months ago, I submitted, if I'm too loud, is that too loud? Good? Okay. The topic on consistency. And so I want to say I appreciated the mayor's comments earlier this morning, as well as Frederick County's executive, Gardner. The service each of you do for your county is often not fully recognized. We all feel that, I think, from time to time, but know that your commitment brings value to each of your communities. And I think that really resonated for me when I heard both of them say that. My name is Lisa Gezzi. I'm a planning commissioner in Talbot County and have served for the last almost 3.5 years. I was appointed in July of 2019. I consider myself a newbie, and this field of consistency, the responsibilities of the planning commissioner are quite, my learning curve has been tremendous. One administrative piece I'd like to bring up, if you would be so kind as to pull out your conference programs, I'd appreciate it if you turn to the page for Wednesday at 2 p.m., which is this. It's page 13, although the page numbers aren't marked. And at the end of the first paragraph, write in this name, Cindy Unangst. She was left out of the program, and I think it's a group thing. We'll all take responsibility, and I want Cindy as well as the other distinguished panelists today to be recognized in the preparation for this panel. In selecting speakers for this very important topic, I wanted to have representatives from counties across the state. We saw that this morning in the plenary session, and I was just really impressed and with the expertise that they each brought to the table. And in this case, to also have representatives serving each roles that are involved in the determination of consistency so that they could share their perspectives in this very important decision. I'd like just to start off with having you get to know the panelists. So I'm going to ask each of them to just spend a minute, and I'll hand the mic down, to introduce themselves, their role, the county that they live in, and even maybe share something a little about themselves that's interesting about their work or themselves.
Thank you. My name is Keith Lackey. I work with the Maryland Department of Planning, and I am located in a field office in Salisbury, Maryland. My region covers Talbot, Dorchester, Wycomico, Worcester, and Somerset counties, and we provide technical assistance to local governments to include the 25 municipalities within that region that have exercise planning and zoning authority. The fun thing she threw on us about a half minute ago, so I will say this. Over the past 13 years, I've been very privileged to work with graduating seniors from the Salisbury University School of Geography and Regional Planning, and it's a 2-semester academic year commitment that a graduating senior takes on and works with our office to get them ready for either a capstone project for graduate school or to go into the profession.
Thank you. My name's Chris Drummond. I'm an attorney in Centerville in Queen Anne's County. I represent departments of planning and zoning and planning commissions in Queen Anne's, Dorchester counties, town attorney for Denton, good friend back in the corner, Don Mulrine from Denton, Chestertown, and the metropolis of Secretary, Maryland in Dorchester County, and am the Board of Appeals attorney in Kent County. I've represented other towns and counties episodically in matters as they come up. I suppose if I'm supposed to say something humorous about myself is that I've been involved in the land use wars on the Eastern Shore since the late 80s, and I'm still vertical.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Unangst. I'm the staff planner for the town of Middletown, which is in western Frederick County. We have a population of just under 5,000. And I've been there for 16 years. Before that, I was an environmental planner up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And fun for me fact was that last week the Frederick County Sustainability Commission honored me with a Sustainability Award in the individual category. I am a staff planner, or a staffing department of one in our small municipality, and I also wear another big hat, which is the co-chair of the Sustainability Committee. And so we've been doing a lot in Middletown regarding sustainability over the years, and I was very honored to get that award.
Congratulations. My whole life is a joke, so I don't think I'm going to add anything other than that. No, seriously, I'm very pleased to be here. The last time the first time, pardon me, that I was at a conference was when I began in 2016, I think it was, as a planning commissioner for Frederick County. It was the first time in my then nearly 30 years of professional planning that I actually had been on that side of the dais. And what a learning experience that was. So I am delighted to be here today, and I look around and see so many people that I've worked with over the years in various roles, and I'm glad you're here today. It's a wonderful crowd, and I just look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. I apologize. I'm Sharon Kemper-Serez, AICP and still vertical, as he said. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Eric Soder, certified land planner with Rogers Consulting. We're a civil engineering firm, headquarters in Germantown, offices in Frederick here, which is my market area, as well as in Prince George's County and Charles County. Before that, I had the pleasure to be the planning director for Frederick County for over a decade, and then before that was worked for the city of Gaithersburg and worked with Danny in the early days. Spent some time Carroll County, Anne Arundel County, and the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. So maybe I can't hold down a job anywhere, but no, a lot of those were early on when you're kind of bouncing around and figuring things out, but certainly now in the private sector. But I guess I don't look at myself as a private sector, public sector land planner. I'm just a land planner because I think collectively we are sort of in this together. And I think we'll kind of talk about that today when we talk about implementing the plan and consistency. So thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Baker. I am the Director of the Department of Planning and Zoning for Washington County. I guess a couple things about me. I've worked for Washington County now for, last week was my 23-year anniversary with the county. I started there in 1999 as just a planner. I say just a planner, but worked my way up to the point of being a director. I think I'd probably reiterate a lot of comments that were already made, that it's nice to see some colleagues out there with shining faces instead of the angry mob. I'm going to steal Kathy Marr's statement this morning about it's nice to be called something other than that lady. And I guess, my first introduction, thank you, Dan. The infamous Washington County is where I am from. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, and it's been a pleasure interfacing with you, getting to know you. I knew none of these people 3 months ago. I've heard reference to some names. I'd met one very informally. So it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for your introductions. In early 2000, the determination of consistency for a significant project came before the Planning Commission that I serve on. It was our responsibility to review an amendment to the County Water and Sewer Plan and determine whether or not the action taken would further certain items in the plan. Items such as policies, timing of implementation, timing of development, etc. We'll be addressing those standards. It wasn't until 4 meetings later and several months passed that we actually came to a determination. The issue is very complicated, And for me, as a fairly new, I'd not been a planning commissioner even a year at that point, it was very difficult. So the determination of consistency has been a challenge for me, and that's why I bring this as a topic today. It's not black and white. There are several gray areas, and it's taken me some time to get my head wrapped around this concept. So our objectives today are really to advance our collective understanding. Many of you may be experts in this area, but I think, I'm a lifelong learner. I think we all are, actually, and we'll all pick something up, even if we do have this one pretty understood. But our objectives are to advance our collective understanding so that we can continue to serve our communities well. And the objectives here are stated, what does consistency actually mean at the state, county, and municipality level? What types of matters require a determination of consistency? The role of the Planning Commission, and what it means when consistency is ultimately determined. As Mr. Snyder shared with the attendees in the Planning Commission training course yesterday, Adam Snyder is a lawyer for Maryland Department of Planning. The state has designated planning and zoning authority to various types of counties in Maryland: charter, code, and non-charter. And you've seen this several times. You saw it twice yesterday. While there are differences in how consistency may be determined, the Maryland Annotated Code places this in the hands of the county planning commissioners. So let me begin with our first panelist, Mr. Drummond, and I will ask. So, if you could describe what the determination of consistency means, and how has the consistency requirement been applied?
Okay. There we go. All right, I think the response to that question is offers me the opportunity to give some broad strokes on on comprehensive plans and this concept of consistency. And I think a short history lesson is important to lay the groundwork for those broad strokes. As we all know, Article 66B, which 5, 6, 7 years ago became the land use article, empowers counties and towns to exercise planning and zoning authority. Should a town or a county decide, which all have, or virtually all except some very, very small towns, to exercise planning and zoning authority, one of the things that has to be accomplished first is the preparation of a comprehensive plan. So what is a comprehensive plan? The definition, or I don't know the definition, but a description of a comprehensive plan has been around for 30, 40 years and really hasn't changed very much. So we can go back as far as 1974, a Court of Appeals decision, a master plan. Oh, that's the wrong one. You have to begin by understanding the distinction between what is planning and what is zoning. Planning looks long-term, it's broad strokes on a canvas. The zoning is the fine-tuning that is supposed to be, quote, consistent with those broad strokes. So there is a distinction between a master plan and comprehensive zoning or rezoning that results from the distinction between the planning function and the zoning function. The end product of the planning function is the production of a master plan that embodies recommendations for an area's development based on predictions of needs and resources for an estimated future period. Now that period we know is, of course, 10 years. We're supposed to update them every 10 years. It proposes goals for orderly growth and development, including the establishment of viable neighborhoods for which it delineates appropriate boundaries. That's from a case in 1984, and that is still a perfectly appropriate description of a comprehensive plan. Prior to the watershed years of 2008, 2009, the idea that comprehensive plans were somehow mandatory or regulatory didn't exist. Courts routinely described comprehensive plans as guides, that they were without statutory authority to mandate what may happen on a particular piece of property. And that approach to comprehensive plans was reiterated by the Court of Appeals in a case with which you may be familiar. It's called Terrapin Run versus Trail. And that was in 2008, wherein the Court of Appeals declared that the comprehensive plan in Allegheny County, I guess, maybe it was Washington, Allegheny County, was simply that, a guide to inform, generally, the Board of Appeals on how it may make a decision on a special exception or conditional use application for the Terrapin Run project. The General Assembly didn't like that, and in 2009 passed legislation that very much changed, in certain respects and in certain areas, the significance of comprehensive plans. In fact, the Court of Special Appeals has described the General Assembly's reaction to the Terrapin Run case as swift and decisive. So once that legislation passed, there's no question that comprehensive plans became regulatory, that is, something which had the force of law in a variety of contexts. Not all contexts regarding land use, but a fair swath of land use activity. And that is, you will find in the land use article, the changes in the land use article in sections 1-301 for counties, and that's for towns, and 1-311 et al. For counties. And what it also provides, and this is important, essentially a definition for consistency. The definition of consistency that the General Assembly supplied for us is not particularly more definitive than what the courts had described as consistency. What it says is that in areas where a zoning decision, not all zoning decisions, but we can specify which ones. In areas where a zoning decision needs to be consistent with the comp plan, consistency is defined as a decision that furthers and is not contrary to the comprehensive plan. I'm not sure that's any more informative than what we all dealt with before 2009. It does leave more gray than black and white. But for purposes of thinking about consistency, those are the terms to apply, because that's what the General Assembly has told us it means, that it must further and not be contrary to a comprehensive plan. Where is this regulatory, where is the regulatory thrust of a comprehensive plan now important or required by the land use article? Special exceptions or conditional uses, depending on what you call them in your jurisdiction, which is a direct reaction to the Terrapin Run case. Implementation, which is by that we generally mean texted map amendments. Master water and sewer plans, amendments to them, or either the creation of them or the amendments to them, and annexations.
And with that, I might have Jill.
Yep. That's the broad strokes.
You pass that down on to Jill. I can project. We'd like to have Jill, from the county's perspective, share with us a little bit more that Chris was going down the path of what types of matters require determination of consistency.
So when I was asked this question, surprisingly, I had a difficult time answering it to myself. Probably, I think, because consistency has become so ingrained in us as planners that you don't even think about, I guess, how to make things inconsistent. You're constantly, as a planner, thinking about, well, how does this interact with another part of the plan or another part of your policies or something like that. So in a way, consistency to me was a difficult question to answer, but I'm going to do my best to give you some examples of what we do at a county level. Primarily, exactly what Mr. Drummond already alluded to in terms of what we evaluate for consistency with our comprehensive plans would include rezonings. That includes both piecemeal as well as comprehensive rezonings. All of our functional planning, including water and sewer plans, our parks, land preservation, parks and recreation plan, and our solid waste management and recycling plans. We also evaluate that as part of our Board of Zoning Appeals applications. Some of you may be familiar with the counterparts to the planning commissions would be our Board of Zoning Appeals, who deal with the zoning side of things. And they deal with that mostly within the conditional uses or special exception uses, where we evaluate whether or not those requests are consistent with the long-term goals of our comprehensive plan. And then finally, annexation applications is one of the ways we remain consistent with our municipalities and their planning efforts. First and foremost, that should be met through the comprehensive plan, but then through annexation applications where developers may have different ideas, or maybe there's even a point where the municipality and the county just simply agree to disagree. We use that consistency factor to do the very best we can to provide that stability for developers to understand what our long-term goals are. So trying to come up with a couple examples of how we have initiated consistency in terms of our planning commission and even from a staff level. What you see up here now projected is Washington County's adopted land use plan in our comprehensive plan. Sure, everybody in the room's familiar with these. Everybody has their own unique way of drafting these documents, but as you can see, we have a pretty generalized map that focuses first and foremost on an urban versus rural policy. Washington County is still a very rural and agronomic economy, and our folks dearly cherish that. So you can see that we have a huge focus in our rural areas for preservation and conservation. And again, as you probably see in most areas, we're back to the growth area that we talked about earlier, and the focus of higher intensity, higher density development within those areas where infrastructure is available. So this is basically the first tool that we use when we're looking at comprehensive zoning, when we're looking at different things coming into new development that may or may not want to change the feel or the flavor of the land use that we anticipated. So we compare it to this plan and we say, does that meet what we intended for that area? It can be very black and white if somebody comes in and says, I want to do commercial in this area that you have designated as low-density residential. Well, obviously that's not consistent, and vice versa. Where it starts to get into the gray areas would be probably my next example of a water and sewer plan amendment that we recently completed in Washington County. What this is showing you is there's a parcel there that you see highlighted in the dark black, is partially within the town of Keedysville, the municipality of Keedysville, and for the most part, outside of there. What I have highlighted is a proposal by that parcel owner to develop a home on public sewer. So on the left, the very far left, the land use plan, you can see that orange area is our preservation area. Our policy is we don't want more development in those areas. We don't want water and sewer to extend outside of our municipalities and bring additional issues to capacity and so forth. In the middle, what you see is our water and sewer plan determinations. Now, actually, the area that's highlighted in blue was actually designated as an S7 area or no plan service. The reason it's blue now is because our GIS people were way too efficient and already updated the maps before I was able to get the graphic in there. But, so it was a no plan service area. Again, that becomes it becomes inconsistent with our comprehensive plan and our goals. But that last map that we show there on the far right comes out of the state's water assessment for the town of Boonesboro, who supplies water for the town of Keedysville and the town of Boonesboro. The other interesting part to this is that parcel that you see there has a purchased development right. It is a rural legacy property. We have purchased the development rights. There is only one development right left to that property. And that is what they are requesting here.
Is that this one here?
It's the big, large 100-acre parcel. So where you see that red circle is where they want to put the house, and then the blue line would be the extension of the sewer line. So while you look at this and say, well, wait a minute, it's kind of inconsistent to extend your services out there for maybe one parcel or whatever, we also looked at the other side of this to say, well, wait a minute, it's in our source water spring and our defined source water assessment area as being in the geography of a spring that we use for public water service. So then that brings in the gray area of, well, what's more important, land use, which they could still get the one lot even if they were on well and septic, or are we looking at public water in order to protect our public source water? So in this case, we found that while it may be inconsistent with certain sections of our comprehensive plan, when you look at this as a whole picture and you take into consideration all of the different things that are affected, it really does seem to be more consistent with our comp plan than it is inconsistent, because we are primarily trying to protect the public health and safety of our citizens. And we felt like that was the overriding point to approving the request for service, for sewer service. So like I said, the whole point of that, I hope you take away, is that things are very gray, can get, well, I was saying to Lisa, you can have 17 million shades of gray out there, and this is just one flavor of it. So I kind of wanted to give you an example of some hard decisions to make and ways to look at things that come across your desk.
Cindy will also address it from a municipality's perspective.
So certainly, from the smaller municipality level, annexations are the one thing that you would think of the most as far as comp plan consistency with those annexations. I thankfully, in the time I've been a staff planner, I have not had to deal with the rezoning, because that would be another opportunity. Our rezonings have always taken place during our comprehensive plan updates, so we haven't had to deal with that separately. But the other thing that we do at the local level as far as consistency with the comp plan are with even site plans or subdivision plans. So we have in Middletown regulations in our zoning code for overlay zoning districts. And part of those regulations are that the land can be designated as being within one of these overlay zoning districts as part of that comprehensive plan process. And when you have a master plan application for an overlay district development, you need to have a justification statement that describes the manner in which that development will conform not only to the requirements of the overlay zoning districts, but also to the town's comprehensive plan. So you're looking at the plan in totality as far as even just a subdivision plan. And then also, for even a commercial site plan, as a staff planner, I look to our comprehensive plan, as I do with all developments, to make sure that you have that consistency. And so you're looking at the municipal growth element and what that particular piece of land is designated as and whether it's compatible. And you're looking at natural features, whether there are environmentally sensitive areas, and certainly you're looking at the water resource element to see whether you have the water. So that's kind of at the very local level, some of the things that you're going to look at aside from what the county looks like or looks at in terms of consistency with those larger plans.
Great, thank you so much. Now, please pass the mic on to Chris Drummond again. I'd like Chris to take a look and share with us the two primary roles of the Planning Commission, because there's two very distinctive roles. And you can address that.
Okay. This refers to the Planning Commission's advisory role versus situations under which the Planning Commission involvement, let's call it mandatory or determinative. Let me begin by reading to you from again, another Court of Special Appeals case wherein the argument was made that the County Council in Baltimore County adopted a amendment to the zoning code and didn't have the authority to do so because it should have been left with the Planning Commission. We're to adopt appellant's contention in this case that the Planning Board was vested by the Baltimore County Council with certain powers regarding the establishment of a town center that are not only recommended, but also prerequisites to the establishment of such town centers, then it seems clear to us that such a zoning procedure would amount to an illegal delegation of the county's legislative powers to the Citizens Advisory Board. The Planning Board has no veto power in the zoning process, and its role is merely advisory. All right. So comprehensive plans may only emanate from planning commissions. The elected officials have no authority to initiate a comprehensive planning process. Only the Planning Commission may initiate it, conduct whatever studies are necessary, rely on staff, hire consultants if necessary. I personally think the consultants' business is overdone in comp plan updates, and they're very expensive. And then come together with a plan, which it then votes on and recommends the adoption of to the legislative body. It's a legislative body that adopts comp plan. That legislative body can't adopt a comp plan, though, unless it's recommended to it by the Planning Commission. That's their advisory function. The elected body cannot change the comp plan, at least arguably substantially, without going back to a Planning Commission and saying, what do you think about this change? Ultimately, you could have a Mexican standoff wherein the Planning Commission says we don't recommend that, and the elected official says, well, we're not going to adopt a comp plan unless you recommend it, and the planning says, well, tough, we're not going to recommend it, and then you don't have a comp plan, or you don't have an amendment to a comp plan. I'm not aware that that has happened. It usually gets worked out. To my knowledge, has always gotten worked out so that a comp plan gets adopted. The elected officials may not, additionally, amend or adopt a master water and sewer plan, which, by the way, is a county plan, not a town plan. Towns are part of the county master water and sewer plan. So the elected officials, if they want to adopt a master water sewer plan or amend it, that is by perhaps amending a service area, taking a service area from W6, S6 to W3, S3, or to add a large project. In Queen Anne's County, for example, a master water and sewer plan amendment is for any allocation that is more than 20,000 gallons a day. I'm sorry, 5,000 gallons a day, which equates to about 20 houses. And that is an amendment that has to go to the Planning Commission for a recommendation on consistency with the comp plan. Annexations, what's interesting about this, I think Keith is going to mention this also, annexations must be consistent with the town's municipal growth element. But unless a town has delegated that decision-making, that consistency decision-making to a planning commission, it's unclear who makes the consistency determination. Most towns that I'm familiar with do refer to a planning commission on annexation consistency findings. I don't think all towns do that, though. And they don't have to. There's nothing in the land use article that says that they must. Mandatory decisions by the Planning Commission, most importantly, involve subdivisions. Subdivisions become, when approved, each subdivision is an amendment to the comprehensive plan. Let that one sit for a minute. Consequently, if it's an amendment to every subdivision is amendment to the comprehensive plan, it by necessity must be consistent with the comprehensive plan that it's amending. And only planning commissions approve subdivisions. Counties and towns that have critical area components and growth allocation procedures, growth allocation almost in every jurisdiction of which I'm aware cannot be approved unless they're consistent with the comp plan. Generally, that's something the Planning Commission involves itself in. In Western Maryland, we don't have very many critical area. I don't know, is there any critical area in Frederick County? Okay. It needless to say, is a big deal on the Eastern Shore, Anne Arundel County, and the Western Shore counties that touch the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. So I know we're going very quickly. That's some of the areas in which Planning Commission's role is advisory. Legislation, advisory only. The elected officials don't do what you want. So long as it's arguably consistent with the comprehensive plan, there's not much you can do about it.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to pass the mic on to Sharon, am I pronouncing it right, Suarez?
That's fine.
Okay. And she's going to talk as a former Frederick County Planning Commissioner and current Frederick City Planning Commissioner, correct?
I am, no, not a commissioner, I'm a staff planner now, city
Planner,
clerk.
okay, all right.
And which would you like me to talk about? My consistency issue?
The role of the Planning Commission in determining
Well,
consistency. And I've got your slides up here.
Yes. There you go. One of the challenges that we all have in the determination of consistency involve the order in which plans are adopted and the impact on the adoption of one plan upon all the others that went before and will come after. And the challenge that we have is the nature of our role. One of our most important roles as planning commissioners. I'm speaking as we because I'm going to speak from my past role as a commissioner. There are some common issues that affect, that are related to lag that are really important to keep in mind. There is a natural lag between, obviously, the work on the adoption to prepare a comp plan, first of which was developing that community vision. The flip side of a vision statement literally is a mission statement. And if you're familiar with business and business manuals and procedures, the mission statement is at the core of what we're trying to do when we determine consistency. Every plan that comes after must help us achieve our mission, which is, if we did our vision right, a community-supported view of what our community will look like for a certain period of time. While we make this, and we're working on that, we inherit a legacy of functional plans that were adopted previously, right? And we're working under a previously adopted comprehensive plan. So we have these things already adopted. We begin our work on the new comprehensive plan. It will, in the meanwhile, and there's a lag. That lag can be a year, 2 years, 3 years. The citizen participation role and the development of community vision can take a year, year and a half. It's critical, as we will, and I'll mention, when you talk about what you're facing right now in your planning commission meetings and the soapboxing you're dealing with, it all goes back to the buy-in that we have to get when we do our community vision, and that flip side, a commitment at the community level all the way up to the top of our municipal leadership on what our mission will be when we adopt our plans, when we review our functional plans, and when the agencies bring forward their next round of functional plans, when the development community brings forward its goals for a site plan or subdivision plan. So there are challenges we face as planning commissioners. One, if you're new and you've come in after a plan has been adopted, you've got a learning curve. And your learning curve is to figure out not just what the functional plans say, but what that vision was and how deep and committed the community is to the vision, and how you can craft a mission statement that you can use to ask yourself, does this activity, does this site plan, does this functional plan help us achieve our mission, which is to implement that vision statement. The frustration of having to enforce an adopted comprehensive plan as you're working on a brand new comprehensive plan is real, and you will experience it. You will find yourself having to vote on determinations of consistency with a past adopted plan because it's on the books. While you may have received information in functional plans that keep happening, keep coming across your desk, bringing new information to you, and you know it's going to affect how you're going to write your new comp plan. That's a challenge. So the goal is to reduce the lag. Can we turn go to there. You've got to reduce the lag between the adoption of your comp plan. Do not let that thing sit on your desk. Do not wait until the functional plans coming across and the site plans and other development plans are coming to you so far after your last comp plan adoption. What will happen is you will have a super disconnect. That's another name for the lag. A super what's up from the community when they see stuff come across and they have forgotten what the vision was. They've forgotten how what you're seeing is related to implementing it. And I suggest you really do work with staff and your community. If you can't recant right now in your mind the vision statement in your adopted comprehensive plan, then you know what your job is when you go home. If that's not up on your website, if that's not on your sign-in sheets, you're going to lose the buy-in the pledge, basically, from the community to help implement the adopted comp plan. And I have something else to say later, but that's related to that, but that's all for now.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Sharon. Now, the Maryland Department of Planning, Keith Lackey is going to talk with us about the guiding elements. What tools does that Planning Commission use to take into consideration to determine consistency?
Thank you. So my slides have a lot of information on them for two reasons. One is to let you know I'm not making some of this up, but more importantly, it's to mesmerize you before I say something I say often. I'm here from the state and I'm here to help. I've worked for 4 different county governments in Maryland, and my supervisor, Tracy Gordy, has worked with several as well, and so I think that lends some credibility when we come out and do these things. This is just, I'm not going to read all of this. I've put in read some of the things that I think are important to understand, and some of this has been said by Mr. Drummond and others, so I'll just pass over them gently and just say that any local law or regulation that local government adopts, any special exceptions or sometimes likened to conditional uses that are done, annexations, and water and sewer master plan updates and amendments all have this consistency requirement out of the land use article. One of the things that's problematic, I think, as a practicing planner at local government is to take these very general plans that have a 25-year outlook sometimes or have some really broad brush policies and recommendations and desired outcomes, how to inform the local laws that are adopted through zoning, subdivision regulations, plan developments, and other types of actions such as adequate public facility ordinances. It's a difficult thing, and one of the things that I think greatly strengthened the comprehensive plan, both in counties and municipalities, was the requirement that by 2008 for counties and municipalities to have a water resources element. There has always been a connection between a county or municipal comprehensive plan and an update or amendment to the water and sewer plan. But the technical bridge between water and sewer plans that often cite the valve size, et cetera, and things in the areas that are being served, and a comprehensive plan saying that we want to do something on this broad scale policy level, was a gap, I think, too far apart to comfortably determine that consistency between those things. And so we at the state level and you at the local level, planning commission level, should be looking at that water resources element, which talks about public water and sewer or community waters and sewers, and also solid waste disposal. I'll be talking a little bit more detail about these elements later. But that is what the state law is pointing out, that the desired relationship between and the consistency between these policy documents, the comprehensive plans, both county, municipality, and water sewer plans, or other local regulations or ordinances. The latter part of the slide talks about priority funding areas. You can see, I'm not going to go through the 7 items that are listed for charter counties, I think it is, that this consistency is supposed to look at. But you'll notice that, for instance, when you look down in the priority funding areas, 2 of those drop off, and they are with respect to density and intensity and land uses. I was not party to the legislature adopting this particular provision, but I think the thought process was, if you're in a priority funding area, the development patterns and intensities are pretty ubiquitous within that priority funding area. So looking at those 2 last thresholds is not germane, or at least as codified. But one of the things it's important to understand too is that the state has a role with respect to these priority funding areas, which is the areas from which local jurisdictions designate, they locally certify what areas it is that they would want to be of a higher priority that would then be eligible for state funding, should state funding be available under the Smart Growth Areas Act or the Priority Funding Area Law and under the State Finance and Procurement Article. Now, that is a local process for which government is the certification process is done, but we, the state, then look at the locally certified area to determine if it is consistent with what the state criteria ask for, and those state criteria are all in relation to the local comprehensive plan or implementation ordinances. For residential uses, we look at zoning. For residential uses, 3.5 dwelling units per acre, or greater density being permitted. It's in a locally designated growth area, locally designated where? In the comprehensive plan. And then also whether or not it might be an employment area. And so the final pillar of that analysis at the state level is it designated for sewer in the water and sewer master plan? Not water, just sewer, but generally speaking, when you serve one, you serve the other, because the water is a dime compared to $1 as far as costs associated with giving public services. So this consistency is not well defined, and it's invasive almost. The interrelationship between everything that we do with respect to our built landscape and our preserved landscape, because for instance in priority funding areas, well, the state is looking for where you're going to concentrate growth, by its very nature on the opposite side is those outside their priority funding areas should be more generally targeted towards conservation, natural resource management, and that type of thing. So this local comprehensive plan, how it defines what it is that the future zoning is going to be, the future land use plan is the key map that drives comprehensive plan with respect to consistency. And then it is also then within various chapters of your comprehensive plan, for instance, if you're looking at an area with respect to doing road improvements, and so you look in your transportation element, and then take a look at an area that is perhaps intended to be ultimately an arterial versus a collector road or something like that. All of these general policies can end up in other plans, like a local transportation plan or a hazard mitigation plan. I think I heard in a session across the hall, we talked about you have a county hazard mitigation plan that needs to be consistent with the county comprehensive plan as well. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, and next, thank you very much, Keith. Cindy Unanx is going to address what information planning commissioners must and can consider in advance of a meeting to have adequate information to determine consistency, including specific code to be addressed, maps, etc.
So as a staff planner, I try to get as much information to my planning commission members as I can. I was talking to a fellow from Frederick County here who used to be a planner and is now a planning commission member, and talking about how I try to anticipate every question I can and answering those in my staff reports or whatever. And there's always, that planning commission member that has a question that I had not anticipated. And so it's frustrating for me, and I feel humbled that I can't always provide the answers as much as I try. So in the case of an annexation and looking at consistency with the comp plan and what I'm providing the planning commission members ahead of that meeting, certainly in my staff report, you're looking at the land use, you're looking at the zoning, you're looking at, again, the comprehensive plan, you're looking at streets and roads, facilities, water and sewer, all that, and you're trying to provide as much information on all those things as you can to your planning commission members, as well as the maps that you're looking at, maybe aerial photos of the property, even going out and taking pictures of it. So for a small municipality like Middletown, all the planning commission members are very familiar with everything in town, but I'm sure for the county level, you might not have ever been to a certain site that you're going to be needing to make a determination on. So again, I'm pulling any information that I can, not only from the comp plan, but the code and any other area plans that you might have, as well as for a municipality, all the county plans that might be pertinent, like the county comprehensive plan. And in the case that we had in Middletown, the property that was had requested annexation was in the town's growth boundary, but it was not in the county's growth boundary for that town, for Middletown. And so there was an inconsistency there. and there also was an inconsistency with the water and sewer plan. And so the town of Middletown ended up annexing that property, but because of the inconsistency between the town's plan and the county's plan, there needed to be an express approval to be able to have that property developed within 5 years of the annexation approval. The town and the developer were fine with waiting out that 5 years because it takes a long time to do your preliminary plans and get the water and sewer infrastructure plans in place and all that kind of stuff. And so we knew it was going to take some time. And Eric might be able to talk some more about that whole 5-year rule, maybe better than I can. But certainly there are instances where we're going to have those inconsistencies.
And with that, let's pass the mic down to Eric, who's going to talk with us about, one, how he helps his clients today determine consistency, but also with the perspective of having been involved in many different counties in many different roles on the county and municipality side.
Okay. So the first slide and next one there. So I know you can't read this. That's what we do in the private sector, give you something you can't read. But this will probably be in the packet and the handout, but it's really important. It's page 18 of the Livable Frederick Master Plan, and my partner here to the left of me is too humble to have brought this up, but she was one that was sitting on the Planning Commission along with Carol Seppi in the audience. Sam was here earlier when Livable Frederick was approved, and this particular page that describes consistency with the comprehensive plan I think is very important. Hopefully it puts a bow on a lot of things we've talked about today that Mr. Drummond was talking about, and then we heard about in terms of from the state guidance. And there's 3 key things that really are pulled out of this 6 paragraphs. And I really urge you as Planning Commission members to look it over, look at what your comprehensive plans have or don't have in terms of consistency. I mean, what's always interesting, in the past in our comprehensive plans, we've always said, it's consistent with the state vision, and the state 12 visions and things like that. We've never really necessarily taken the time to say, what does it mean to be consistent with our plan? And I think, Mr. Drummond mentioned that state guidance is a little bit soft. And I'll take some blame for that, honestly, because I was planning director at the time at Frederick County, and when that case came down, they asked the MACO planning directors for, some guidance, and we, said, okay, pull from the state guidelines and add some of this additional language in, because as soft as this language is, the prior language, I think, would have the term to be in harmony with. And that was even more like, oh my gosh, bang your head against the wall. So hopefully we get better and better and learn over time. And I think that's what Frederick has done here. So the next slide, when I look at a development application, and this kind of ties into even what Cindy said, it's incumbent on the applicant to provide that information. It's not always, and in fact, in Board of Appeals cases, many of them, it's what is provided into the record. Yes, you can have a friendly staff and a friendly jurisdiction that supplements the record and puts things in there, but really, as an applicant, as a land planner, it's responsible. I'm responsible for my client's development application, and I'm responsible for pulling out those things, because quite frankly, staff should be able to say, see applicant stuff, see staff report, see justification statement. There shouldn't have to be a additional 30-page staff report that regurgitates stuff that the applicant really should be responsible for. I know it doesn't always happen. I mean, I've been on both sides of the coin in that regard, but it's really incumbent on those applicants to put that in there. But it's also incumbent on the jurisdiction to make sure there's enough in the plan that they can pull from. So when I look at an application, absolutely the things that we've heard about in the terms of policies, timings, I look at that as a checklist, and we try to pull those things out. And even if the development application doesn't necessarily require a statement of justification, that's what we do. When I do a water and sewer application, water and sewer applications are generally straightforward because they're within the water and sewer service area and things like that, and it's the consistent color on the map, or even a rezoning, like a floating zone that we do a lot here in Frederick. But you have to kind of go more than that and put in more than that. And even for water and sewer, I will put statements in there and find statements in the water and sewer master plan or in the master plan itself to support that. The next slide is the second part of that. It's like the third paragraph in the livable Frederick in terms of consistency. And this was the one element that when we were talking to the state legislature that they didn't put in the state law, but I think it's really important. And it comes from, if you haven't seen it, the 92 or 2002 models and guidelines. I mean, it's an old document, but Maryland Department of Planning does a really good job with those models and guidelines. And I've always looked at this when I was a staff planner, and I was happy that we worked the development community along with the Planning Commission when it was time to put statement of consistency. They actually expanded upon this in the Livable Frederick Master Plan. And I'll read this to you. And what it basically says is land use regulations and land use decisions should agree with and implement what the plan recommends and advocates. A consistent or decision may show clear support for the plan. It may also be neutral, but it should never undermine the plan. And that kind of goes to what Jill was mentioning. I think they basically did that without probably knowing that that language is in their models and guidelines that they could pull from and help that argument. Because really undermining the plan is what we don't want to do collectively, I believe. And then the third paragraph, and again, this was Frederick County's way of explaining consistency and building upon it, and I will read this short part of it. It says, in the end, determining consistency with the comprehensive plan should not be a forum for reversing adopted policies, but rather should support development that results in implementation over time. And that's really key because you've all been there where you have a development that's coming in and maybe it is building something but not building all of it and you're struggling with it. Well, you're not building the full path, you're not building this, but is it undermining the plan? Well, no, it's not undermining the plan. Is it getting us to where we want to be? Yeah, I think it is. So this language can help you as you move forward in reviewing those things. And I think it's important when something is neutral, meaning there isn't something that in the plan that there's really clear acknowledgement, we should state that. We should state that as an applicant. You know, there's nothing really in the plan one way or another that clearly states that this is consistent or inconsistent, but you should follow that up with how does it not undermine the plan, and I think that's incumbent on us to show how it doesn't undermine the plan. With that, the only other thing I'll add is, with water and sewer, the one thing that kind of came out of that, if Cindy may recall, is, Frederick County at the time struggled because in their water and sewer plan, when it was finding of consistency, it wasn't clear whether it was looking at the municipal plans, and we have, 12 municipalities, but, I guess 8 or 10 of them have, have their own separate planning and zoning, or was it the county plan? And it was a struggle. So we amended our water and sewer plan to make sure it was very clear that deference was given to the municipal master plan. So it's a little bit odd because the Planning Commission at the county, when they're reviewing that water and sewer, they have to look at it and say, is it consistent with the city or the municipal plan, which helps because, as you know, you may have different land use issues because the city or municipality is moving on a plan exercise much further than the county. But it helped clarify that and move it forward. And I guess the only other kind of tidbit or takeaway was with CIPs or capital improvement programs. When those come every year to the Planning Commission, a lot of times they struggled because a few commissioners, he's not here so I can talk about him, say, well, gosh, we're not implementing the plan because we don't have enough schools in here to implement 20 years of planning. And we had to sit back and say, well, wait a minute. Again, this is about implementing the plan over time. We can't, in a 6-year CIP, implement a 20 or 30-year vision. And that's where that language actually was born from during those CIP discussions. We pulled from the state guidance and then it's starting to live in the comprehensive plan. So I think it's helpful. It's helpful for me now as we bring development applications, because I look at those three elements as guidance of how I can bring when I bring a development application to the city or municipalities or the county, and just encourage you all to look at that as well as you plan.
And that's a really good example of there being some gray area when you've got different plans saying different things and what takes precedence. And kind of a follow-on to that, and one of the interesting things that Sharon and I spoke about briefly in preparing for this was, what role does public comment play in the determination of consistency? And how does the Planning Commission take and use that information? How do you create an environment so the Planning Commission can hear the public's concerns?
Thank you, and I know this is a topic near and dear to everyone's heart. It's getting more and more dear as time goes on. It goes just to make sure we are all on the same sheet of paper. Public participation defines not only how the public inputs, but it does affect what we hear and how we hear it. It affects who we listen to. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to share with you something that a lot of people who have gone to planning school are familiar with. This is Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation. It's an oldie. Sherry Arnstein was not a planner, she was a social worker. But Sherry is considered a planning hero because she provided this typology of citizen participation. I've annotated it because I've used this many years at various conferences and so forth to share the importance of her observations. First of all, looking at the bottom, she has this is the participation. Now, less than almost everything we do as planners, as citizen planners, planning commissioners, and working planners at local jurisdictions, and even in the private sector. Less so, though, in the private sector, and I'll explain why. But almost everything that happens in jurisdictions for planning or decision-making involves less than empowering citizen participation. That includes our public hearings. And why do I say it's not empowering? Well, we have an us and them. We take comment from people sequentially as they come up after. We might have one or two voices that take over a public response. We all know that. We've seen it. We can't. The only way we can control that is through tools like Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules. Read the purpose of Robert's Rules. It's to ensure that all voices are heard. Now, Mr. Roberts was, a Maryland resident. And his wife was too. We have a lot of gratitude in Maryland, a lot of affiliation in Maryland for Robert's Rules of Order. It's critical to be able to pull this off. You have to have a very strong MC in your meeting. You have to have a host or a planning chair, and I know I've seen a lot of very good planning chairs out here. God love them. All I can say is it takes real power and equanimity to be able to ensure a public hearing nowadays is not, what's the right word for it? Is not taken over. Yeah, exactly. So there are standard things that that take place in any of the public meetings that I'm going to talk about. They all have a format. They all have rules of procedure. They all set time limits. They all use get an agreement on civility or not. They all have a purpose and an agenda. All good meetings have those things. But when we're looking about how to ensure that every voice, meek voices as well as the loud ones, have an opportunity to inform us as planning commissioners, we have to take some extra special steps. If you notice the ones at the top of Arnstein's ladder, yes, planning boards are considered empowerment. Why? Because you are citizens. So that's huge, right? We do have neighborhood workshops. Wonderful. And we do have, very few times, but occasionally with great and tremendous success and enthusiasm, open house public meetings. I can't claim that the planners actually initiated the use of open house public meetings. I can give the real credit to state departments of transportation who, when faced with really controversial alignment decisions, realized they couldn't just have a soapbox. They needed input. They needed to empower residents and other agencies and governments, local governments. They had to empower them to tell them where or where not the alignment might work best. We can learn from that. And the reason why I exempted the private sector from being ones who did not use that so much is because almost always nowadays, when we want to have an open house public meeting or public hearing, we are using the services of a consulting team. Doesn't have to be that way. And I am proud to say that when Livable Frederick was developed, we empowered the staff planners to go all over Frederick County with open house public meetings. The enthusiasm and the controversy, and if you go to the next slide, was shared on a different kind of soapbox. If all we are providing is a microphone in a public hearing room, we're doomed. So if you're going to have a public meeting that allows you to record and take in comments, we have to think about outside the box just a bit. Now you can, if you're going to have, and for some reason, for some venues, that format of a microphone and an audience is really the only way it's going to happen. So in those times, don't ever go in without a strong host, whether it's planning staff or planning board or planning commissioner or a consulting team. They must own the meeting. They must establish rules of procedure. They must lay out the ground rules. We have to define that sandbox. And we have to ensure our role in the government in the sunshine is nothing if all it is revealing outrage. If we want to follow our goal of government in the sunshine, we have to still maintain that our main purpose is to ensure the ability to hear all voices. Set those timelines, set the civility rules. I'm one of those. They should be on the front of any sign-in sheet.
And by hearing those people, we can also incorporate that into our
Absolutely.
decision.
Absolutely. So if you want to hear the ideas that minor voices can bring to you, the meeker voices, please consider other venues. And if you have to fall back on the traditional public hearing format, ensure that you have a strong host and good rules of procedure, and listen to those voices. That's really the only way we're going to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And we're going to go back to Keith for a minute here. Keith had mentioned something that I really was unaware of, and that was the role that the state plays in determining consistency.
Thank you. So the issue of consistency goes beyond the land use article. I'm going to speak to two other articles of state government, and one is the environment article and the other is the local government article. So with respect to water and sewer master plans, both the full updates and incremental amendments to water and sewer master plans have specific provisions in the environment article that local consistency with the local comprehensive plan has to be found. And one of the things I think Mr. Drummond said earlier, sometimes who that is, we don't know. But in the environment article, it says planning agency. So I don't know if that's the department or the planning commission, but I would advocate that the planning commission would be an appropriate venue for making that, or at least advising the elected officials that ultimately adopt an amendment to or an update to a water sewer master plan. I've forgotten this gentleman's name here, sir. You? Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that he brought up that I had here to talk about is the state, we do, and I don't know if it was preceded by or after your initiative, is at the local assistance and training level, when we have a water and or sewer amendment proposed within a municipality, we judge that on the municipal comprehensive plan. And if it's in the county, it's the county comprehensive plan. So that's what we do. And when you guys look at this consistency, and we as state planners, we are charged with the environment article by advising the Maryland Department of the Environment whether or not a proposed amendment or an update is consistent with the comprehensive plan. We look at the land use articles, the community facilities, land use elements, community facilities element, water resources element. If there is a tier map adopted, we also look at a tier map. That would be a discussion for another day. And similarly, we would look at the municipal comprehensive plans for determining if there is consistency with a proposed amendment. And then our client at this point is the Maryland Department of the Environment. Earlier I was talking about giving it technical advice to the counties and municipalities. In this role, we are advisory to the Maryland Department of the Environment. And sometimes these inconsistencies can't be helped. And I'm going to bring this up. It's particular to the Eastern Shore of Maryland with respect to, or at least in my area, with respect to failing septic systems. We have a lot of, in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, the health department regulations have changed from old times when you could get an individual septic system on maybe a couple acres. Now you need about 145 acres or maybe 4 acres or something like that to get that. And sometimes when these systems fail over time, the health department can't even approve a new on-site septic system. So there are times at which a water or a sewer plant amendment would be driven by a public health emergency when a septic system is failing or is imminently failing. We will identify that, but in our analysis, but we also then in our other areas of interest outside of just advising the Department of Environment, offer to the local jurisdiction assistance with amending the comprehensive plan to speak about particular circumstances related to environmental health emergencies that don't necessarily trump the land use analysis of it being an agricultural area but getting public sewer, but has clauses that speak to that issue so that we can recognize that perhaps this land use designation for a proposed sewer extension is agricultural land use, but we have a clause in the local comprehensive plan that speaks to failing public septic systems, and we would require then a Department of Environmental Health letter that demonstrates that. You just can't do it without having some demonstration of that. So, and then finally, in our back to advising and helping local jurisdictions, we also do an analysis as to whether, if the Department of Environment does adopt a sewer extension, a water sewer service area, or particularly a sewer service area, that may have been one of the only reasons remaining for which a previously locally certified priority flooding area was not concurred with by the state, because at the time, let's say for instance, it didn't have a public sewer plan extension. We could then advise that it appears of which, if this is adopted, we would encourage the local jurisdiction to recertify that area and resubmit it, and then we could gain concurrence, and then that way that would be one of those parcels that enjoys that readiness for state funds if state funds are available and the individual project meets the requirements of that funding source. So the second
happened in southern Kent Island.
Yes.
Exactly.
Talbot County, I worked with the County Planning Commission and Board of Public Works and the Department of their Public Works Department and their Board of Public Works on extending sewer for just one amendment alone was 680 parcels of land inside and outside of rural villages, but in need of this extension because of just rapid and multiple septic system failures. And so we worked first for a comprehensive plan adoption amendment to make that more consistent with ultimately a comprehensive water sewer plan amendment. And then lastly, I'll talk about the local government article, which yet again, talks about consistency with the comprehensive plan. This is an element, the municipal growth element is one of the two 2008 requirements for municipalities, one being the water resources element that I spoke to earlier, but the municipal growth element is required, and there are several things that the municipality was required to take a look at. First of all, what the capacity within the municipal jurisdiction was with respect to infill and redevelopment, but then if they were to propose locally designated municipal growth areas, they would map them and perhaps even put some timing as to when these would be prioritized or for what type of uses a particular municipal growth area would be. That would then make the properties that are within that mapped area that are proposed for annexation be, it says right in state law that once that municipal growth element is adopted, then that is the basis from which the local jurisdiction has to determine if the annexation is consistent through an annexation plan with the adopted local comprehensive plan. And so there are several things that can do as benefit to local government as well, because many of the things that are outlined in a municipal growth element speak to public safety, health, emergency medical, schools, libraries, and those types of things. If the municipal growth element is done as rigorously as was intended when the bill was passed, it then can set the stage for requiring things of proposed, of annexations that are being proposed, even beyond that which is going to be required by the zoning district of which they will have been created to. It says right in there, you can't just go willy-nilly, but the state law provides that you can have, because the annexation plan can lead to an annexation agreement that might give something that you would require of the proposed annexation property owner. And so, for instance, if in your proposed within your municipal growth element you have this, you identify an absence of or a deficiency in sidewalks for pedestrian safety, you can require of a property to be part of the annexation agreement with the municipality to help assist with that within that development area, so that ultimately that gap might be bridged. And finally, I'm going to talk about our role. I'm sorry, one other thing. We do, our client now, if I've gone longer than most people, I apologize.
You can tell me the wealth of information.
Yeah, let me just say one last thing. One of the things that we also provided an analysis of is to the county is whether or not the proposed zoning is substantially different or appears to be substantially different from that being proposed for annexation, because the county has the power not to hold up an annexation, but if it's determined, and it's the county's determination that it is, the county determines that the use is substantially different from with respect to use or intensity of residential zoning density, they can not stop the annexation, but they can prevent the municipality from allowing development proposals to be moved forward that are not consistent with the county zoning at the time of the proposed annexation for a period of 5 years, so that ostensibly the county can perhaps look around the surrounding area of a small area of that large, let's say a large annexation. Perhaps the county would want to change its land use plan reflective of that, that annexation. I apologize.
Okay.
So if you have any questions for Keith, his cell phone is 443. So we're going to wrap it up with one last question, and I'm sorry, we're only going to have time for probably one or two from you, so get your questions lined up. Hold on one second. And Mr. Drummond is going to be answering, okay, so this is a go, no go, and what does this mean for the legislative body and its next steps? And sorry, Chris, to kind of cut you short, but maybe if you could answer that in a minute or so.
There are two cases since the late 1970s in which the courts have held expressly that a comprehensive plan trumps an approval by a planning commission. One is a case we know from, a lot of us know about from Cecil County, where a comprehensive plan said there couldn't be more than X number of houses per acre in a particular zoning district. The Planning Commission approved a subdivision that had more than that density, and that subdivision was tossed out because it was inconsistent with a specific provision of the comp plan. About 7 or 8 years ago, in a Prince George's County case, a district council, and they'll call planning commissions in Montgomery County and PG County, district council approved, as I recall, a subdivision in what's called the rural tier in PG County. And the PG County, they don't have a master, it's the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission master plan or something like that, had what are called numerical restrictions on new residential development in the rural tier. And the Court of Special Appeals or Court of Appeals found that the Planning Commission did not consider adequately the numeric limitations in the plan when they approved the subdivision. So, what do we learn from that? Is a comprehensive plan should be what they're intended to be, which are planning documents. That is to give broad, general guidance on how growth is to occur over the planning period, and try to avoid specific regulations that really should appear in a zoning code. In the zoning code, consistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. another case. This is an unreported case, but here's what the Court of Appeals said about it. Had to do with a relatively small solar project in Washington County. I believe it's called In Ray Twig. Is that out of Washington County? It may have been Garrett County, I'm not sure. But essentially what the Court of Appeals said was, and there were some consistency issues in it, well, the use is authorized by special exception. And the Board of Appeals approved the special exception, therefore the use must be consistent with the comp plan. So we're not out of the circular argument. We're not out of the chicken and egg, even with what the General Assembly did in 2009. The point being, if the appellate courts in Maryland, even the appellate courts in Maryland, don't recognize sometimes the distinction between planning and zoning functions, it behooves planning commissions to be absolutely as sure as they can be that the zoning codes match the comprehensive plan. When your zoning maps match the comprehensive plan. Because if you get a challenge to a planning commission or a Board of Appeals decision or a zoning administrator's decision on minor site plans or minor subdivisions, courts have a tendency to do the circular argument. Well, if you've permitted it, it must be consistent, even though it's supposed to be the other way around. So bird dog the elected officials on zoning text amendments. One final vignette in Denton recently. The 2010 comprehensive plan for Denton proposed a new zoning district called mixed industrial. It was intended to take a small area of the town where railroad used to go through, where there were, I think it was an old sawmill, there was a lumber yard, there were some warehouses, which once the railroad ran away had fallen into disrepair or disuse. And the idea was to introduce a transition period towards residential. Let's let the industrial uses stay there as non-conforming and encourage residential use. 2 months ago, somebody came into the town and said, I want a microbrewery and a restaurant. The elected officials were all over it, as you might imagine. The problem is, it was not permitted under the table of permitted uses, because the table of permitted uses in the MI district was consistent with the comp plan that said, continue with industrial and let's introduce residential. Staff had to slow down the town council and say, let's fix the comp plan first before we fix the zoning code. Particularly in smaller jurisdictions where everybody knows everything, it's helpful for the Planning Commission to keep its ear to the ground and slow down the elected officials.
All right, thank you all for your words of wisdom. We have time for one, maybe two. Yes. Actually, why don't you do it so we don't have to repeat it?
I have what I hope is a quick question about lag time that Sharon talked about, and I think this might be best given to Chris, but so the City of Frederick, we did our comprehensive plan for 2020, which was approved April of 2021. So we were in the draft stage for a little over a year. And I believe at that time, could be wrong and Joan will correct me, but I believe there was nothing that was inconsistent with the 2010 plan. It might have been neutral or not have noticed, but we did put in both our comments from the Planning Commission and in the staff reports that it was consistent with the draft 2020 plan. So I guess my question is, in that lag time, what role does that draft plan play? And what if the draft plan was actually inconsistent with the current approved plan? That's part B.
Until it's approved, a comp plan has no either advisory or regulatory authority until it's approved. So it is true that staff in all the in the jurisdictions that I represent, and I'm aware of others where I have appeared on behalf of property owners or developers, staff does have a tendency to refer to what a draft plan will say. I think it's more, it should be no more than informational.
We'll take it down there too. Just add to it.
And well, just to add to that, in Frederick, I had a development application. It was a rezoning that we had submitted, and it was going through the process. And I'm trying to remember if we had gotten to Planning Commission yet or not. But in between that time, the comprehensive plan changed. Livable Frederick Master Plan got approved. And again, it's incumbent on us. And we talked to the staff, and I said, I want to amend my development application because I want to make sure the record reflects that we are now consistent with the new plan. And we were able to add policies, statements, goals, pull all those same things from the new plan. So that happens as well. You might have an application that is straddling one of your planning efforts. And, to be sure, because as we know, things get litigated, somebody wants to find a reason to pull something, that would be an easy thing because you have statements there that don't mean anything because that was the old plan, so it can kind of work both ways. So if you have something that's straddling it, everyone should be awake and note that you may need to allow for amendments to those applications. So at least an updated statement of justification can be put in there so you can reference new goals, policies, those types of things.
And yes, the longer the period of time between your updates, the greater the opportunity for this kind of issue, this kind of existential dilemma that planning commissioners, planning staff, and the applicants will find themselves in. So there are opportunities. You don't necessarily sometimes have to open your entire comp plan. Some jurisdictions have so much work done in their comp plan, it's all basically fine, and all the functional plans that have come in seem to be in concert with what's already adopted, except maybe one area. Talk about opening just that area up and readopting it. So that's what big jurisdictions, Montgomery County's notorious for doing that. They maintain a 30-year maybe 35-year general plan. When I was there in 2011, we opened up the housing element and updated that, and they've updated several other just sections of it. But that's the way you keep the lag from causing you to have this dilemma with inconsistency and frustration and worry about, are we consistent or not?
Well, thank you, distinguished panel. We do not have time for more questions. Please feel free to reach out. We will have the slides posted. We also have a reference list that we'll post. Thank you, MCPA Board, for allowing this to be in your program, and thank you, Joe Griffiths. I want to say Joe is amazing. You've all seen that, so thank you all.
Let's give a round of applause for this fabulous group that just gave this presentation. Let me remind you, we're going to take a quick break, but we still have 2 concurrent final sessions. The Community Challenge of Emptying and Empty Houses of Worship, and citizen planners' role in planning for housing over the next 20 years. Those 2 sessions will be in the smaller breakout rooms here across the hall, okay? So, also, there will be follow-up emails that will be sent to all of you regarding AICP credits, as well as other information about this. We're so glad you've attended. We're not finished yet. We've got about a little over an hour.